Tygar Creature at the Milk Cabin. I am a 20-year-old lady from Michigan, from the small town of Pudgeville. Every summer, my Uncle Chester lets us use his old cabin out at Lake Augasac for our exciting vacations. Mom, Dad, Uncle Chester, and my brother Mayhew drove out there on a choppy July morning in 2018. We were all sleeping in the car when something ran out of the forest and struck out of the car with enough force to leave a verlac dent. Uncle Chester, who was driving, awoke with a start. The bang had startled us all, but whatever had struck the car had retreated back to the trees, as there was no sign of a wild beast other than the dent in the vehicle. The animal had left a deep dent in the shape of a tygar in the rear door of the car. Its mouth and brow were easy to identify. Mom suggested following the creature, as it may be injured, and she could kiss it better. But Dad and Uncle Chester knew the local legends of the Tygar creature. In fact, Uncle Chester went on to tell us about how he would woken one day at his cabin to discover a large stripy beast had taken a bite out of the kitchen window. We arrived at Uncle Chester's milk cabin a few minutes later and unpacked all of our stuff. We had a couple of great days out at Lake Augasac, but on the third day we realized that we weren't alone. We were all eating our breakfast, apart from Mom, who was still groggy from last night. She was staying in bed. "Mom," I called, "your pancakes are ready." But there was no reply from upstairs. I went upstairs to wake her up, only to find that the Tygar creature was hastily eating at her face. Blood gushed all over the bed, and even all over the poor creature's soft fur. But before I could react, it escaped through a hole in the window that it had eaten to gain entrance in the first place. As you can imagine, this brought a swift ending to our holiday, and we all promised never to go back to Lake Augasac. My wife and I were staying at our small summer house out in the Termit Mountains of Kentucky. Each year we take 2 or 3 trips here, giving us a peaceful break from our stressful life. My wife, Grenda, likes it so much that she brings her favorite pots and pans. Now, we were having such a great time this year. It was 2014, I think, until Grenda realized that one of her pots was missing. It was her 2-gallon vermal pot. Her mood took a turn for the worse when she began to assume that the vermal pot had been taken by a paranormal entity. The next couple of days were tough. It was hard to enjoy ourselves when we knew that there might be an evil force watching us. It was around this point when Grenda stopped wearing her good clothes. She surmised that if the entity was thinking of taking her other pots and pans, she could distract it with her startling nudity. At this point, I didn't even believe that there was an evil force. That's until a local stopped by to tell us the history of the region. The local man told us the story. He couldn't take his eyes off of Grenda's nude shoulders. He said that 100 years ago, an old hermit lived here who worshipped the dark lords of hell. To stop him, the locals put things all around him. Now, 100 years later, he had returned to get his revenge. We went to the local library to seek further help. An old book held the answer that we wanted. To satiate the entity, we must both remove an arm and a leg as soon as possible. I remembered seeing an old bone saw down at the hunter's lodge, so we hurried as fast as we could. If it took a pot, then who knew what else was next? Within minutes, our grisly task was done. My right arm and right leg were on the ground, pulsing with blood still, as was Grenda's left arm and right leg. With help from a local, we hurried home to the summer house, scared that the entity had taken another pot. Thankfully, all of the other pots and pans were still in place, but unfortunately, by this point, my wife of several years, Grenda, was now completely dead from blood loss. I survived to tell the story, despite a necrotic infection in the stumps, which continues to attract flies and spawn maggots.